Right, so Alexander, now one of the things I often hear is if Arabia had any semblance of civilization, if Arabia had anything to offer the world, if Arabia and the Arabs were of any significance, then surely Alexander the Great would have stopped by and conquered that region. It's actually quite a common point raised, but to great dismay by Muslims. I've heard Muslims say this. If Arabia before Islam was worth anything to anyone, surely Alexander would have stopped, because he went to Iran. He traveled, he crossed that region, and he went on to conquer. Why did he not stop and conquer the Arabs first and then move to Iran? So these are things I hear, and it betrays a lack of study when it comes to ancient Greco-Roman civilization, first and foremost, and also a lack of study of the Arab history. Because as a matter of fact, it has been recorded and attested to. Alexander did indeed plan to conquer Arabia. He simply did not have time to do so. So in the year 334 before the Common Era, Alexander, with 50,000 of his soldiers, crossed the region and went to confront the Persian Empire. He defeated them, as we know, and he took over the region, the Persianate realms, and all of their territory. He also pushed forward to the regions close to India, parts of India. So he does that, and on his way there, he establishes a Greco-Persianate empire and cultural influence. So, for example, he treats the nobles in those regions with respect. He grants them equal rights. So those who were conquered in the Persian realms are granted equal rights as the Greeks have and the Macedonians have. He also marries. He marries into those people, and he orders, or he facilitates for his soldiers and generals to marry local women. So now it's a political marriage to establish himself and his empire in that region. Okay, and this was not uncommon at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and ancient rulers and classical rulers, that in order to stabilize a region you've conquered, you marry into that tribe. Modern minds look at that and think, well, why did the Prophet have more than 4 wives? Why did he have 9 wives? Right? Not realizing that that was part and parcel of growing an empire, growing a community. Once you conquer a certain region, you marry into that family for political ties. Okay, so modern minds oftentimes overlook that. They don't realize marriage is not always for love. Marriage is a political act. It used to be a political act anyway. And so Alexander does that when he enters that region, and he organizes a mass wedding, 10,000 grooms and brides. These Europeans would marry into these local Persianate people. And of course, that genetic pool is still visible there. You find that genetic pool, or the remnants of that, is still visible there. Okay? So on his way back then, so now that he's dealt with the greater enemy, the Persian Empire, on his way back, he's traveling back, he has plans on conquering Arabia. So for those who say, why did he cross Arabia and never looked back? The answer is this. The prize, or the greatest priority at that time, was Persia. That was a great priority because they were an empire and they had a lot of territory. So he had to conquer the greater empire first, and then on his way back, he began to plan and plot and prepare to conquer Arabia. Now we know this because he had sent 3 individual reconnaissance missions into Arabia. He had sent 3 missions, intelligence collecting missions, into Arabia to prepare to conquer. Furthermore, he began to make excuses. He began to draw excuses as to why he had to conquer Arabia. So before you enter a land and conquer them, you have to find a reason why you have to enter the land. So we are told that Alexander was indeed planning to colonize the coast along the Persian Gulf. So this is Oman and Qatar and Kuwait, which is closest to Persia. It makes sense. If you've just conquered Persia, the next region in Arabia close is those regions. So he planned to conquer that region. And he considered that a prosperous region. So it wasn't worthless, as people say it was worthless. He didn't consider it worthless. Furthermore, he began to prepare, as I said, to enter that region. He sent 3 individual reconnaissance missions, but he was unable to complete his plans. He died very young, in his early 30s. So he was unable to complete and actually go through with the mission of conquering Arabia. But we do know that he had plans to do so, and he had sent missions into the region and was preparing to conquer that region on his way back from conquering the Persianate realms. Okay? So that's something that we know. Now, when Alexander dies in the year 323, so here you have, in 323, he sends the missions into Arabia, 3 of them. However, he dies, so he's not able to complete that vision. When he dies unexpectedly, his realms and his territories were divided amongst his generals and the people he left behind him. And they went to war against one another. So they lost sight of that bigger picture to consolidate the efforts of Alexander and to continue expanding the region. Rather, they turned against one another and they began to fight for territory. So by 228 BC, we have 3 distinct, you could say, chunks of Alexander's empire. You have 3 distinct kingdoms. Dynasties are established. They have split into 3 ways. The Antagonids remained in Macedonia, you could say Europe. The Seleucids went to Asia Minor, the Persianate region, and those regions like in Asia Minor, for example, towards Constantinople, those regions there. And the Ptolemies Ptolemites went to Egypt. That's why we have, for example, Cleopatra in Egypt. So his realms were divided into 3 ways. Those in Macedonia, effectively in Europe, where he came from, those in Asia Minor, and those in Egypt. And these empires will, of course, grow closer to the Arabs, especially those in Egypt. And that's why we have tribes later on who speak European languages, who adopt Christianity, and who are threatening to conquer Medina, for example, Banu Ghassan. Yeah? So these remnants of this tribe, of this empire, settled in these 3 places. The Seleucids took an interest in Eastern Arabia. So again, Alexander had planned to expand his realms from Persia into Arabia from the eastern region because he considered it valuable, but also it was closest to Persia. So he had planned to enter and conquer that region. So that part of his empire that was established there also maintained that interest. However, they never entered and conquered. Instead, they traded. Instead, they had relationships with those neighboring tribes, but they never fully conquered. And those in Egypt, as we know later on, is taken over by the Byzantine emperors. And you have a very strong presence of Europeans, pretty much effectively Europeans in Egypt. Muqawqis was a European, for example. And they were there until the advent of Islam. They remained there and they were ruling that region. Yeah? They were ruling that region. So there was a great deal of Greco-Roman Hellenistic influence in Arabia. From that moment onwards, the influence of the Greco-Roman civilization, Hellenistic civilization, could be seen in the carvings, temple carvings. Some of the gods they worshipped were clearly European gods. We will discover that and explore that when we look at, for example, the pantheon of ancient Arabia. They were worshipping European women, at least in the form of European women, Greek gods, for example. Yeah? If you look at the temples, they have the same structure of the Greek gods. The name may be different, but it's the same deity. The coins they would use, the currency they used, was Greco-Roman currency. Words such as dinar and dirham come directly from ancient Greece and the ancient Roman Empire. So there was a great influence in Arabia from these, you could say, regional empires. And the claim that Alexander had no interest and there was nothing worth conquering in Arabia is simply misunderstanding. At best, a misunderstanding. At best, misunderstanding. Yeah. Had he had the time and opportunity, perhaps Arabia would have been very different today. Allahu A'lam. Yeah.
If you're enjoying this lecture and would like to learn more about the history of ancient Arabia in all of her glory, then you will love Civilis Arabica. This series of lectures is delivered as part of an annual history program for only £10 a month. In it, you'll be able to uncover 2,000 years of pre-Islamic history through an immersive and unique learning experience delivered exclusively through the official Historion app. As a Patreon member, you may register onto this program by selecting the essential tier available on the membership page for instant access to over 7 complete and unique courses ranging from the history of the Umayyad Kingdom through to the rise and fall of the empires of Mali and Abyssinia. You will then be granted access to 7 complete and individual courses. Subscriptions may be cancelled at any time. There are no minimum terms or commitments.